In this video, we'll expand your decision statement vocabulary by discussing the conditional operator as well as the switch statement. Remember, decision statements change the flow of code by evaluating and then redirecting the flow of code from a sequential line-by-line processing to bypass blocks of code that don't apply to the current situation or conditions. Okay, yesterday we learned about the if statement. We saw how that worked. Earlier today, we learned of a second new way to write a decision statement using the conditional operator. Remember this? String message equals, then we're going to evaluate, is x greater than y? If it is, then return the value of boat, assign boat to our variable message. Otherwise, if it's not, if y is greater than x or equal to it, then take car, literal string, and assign that to message. So that's a great shortcut to writing this exact same intent using only yesterday's if statement discussion. Look at how much more code we'd have to write to do the same thing. String message. If x is greater than y, open close bracket, of course we know we can leave that off, but message equals boat, else, open close bracket, message equals car. So we definitely want to keep the conditional operator in our bag of tricks. It's a great way to do an inline conditional check, and especially the way that I've used it here to assign a value to a variable without having to write several lines of code. Okay. So now let's go back to the if statement that we used yesterday. Actually, I have it loaded up here. I rewrote it in a new project called Day 2. And you can see we have our if user value equals 1, then do this. Else if user value equals 2, else if user value equals 3, and else. All right, so you know this worked. It worked just fine. But generally, if you've got a lot of potential values, you can write this same intent more succinctly by using the switch statement instead. So I'm going to do this. Let me just delete all this, and then I'm going to be quiet for a minute and just start writing. I'm going to delete everything up to there. Okay. All right, just make sure this works. Let's run it. Okay, feel good about that. All right, so what's the difference between the if statement and the switch statement? Well, it's really exclusivity. We could write if statements in such a way that one or more are true, and so one or more blocks of code are executed. But with the switch statement, only one will be true. We are looking at user value. It can only be 1 or 2 or 3, and then there is the default message. Look at the syntax. First of all, we define and we're evaluating this this expression. In this case, it's a simple operand, the value, user value. And then we open up a block of code, and within that we define a number of cases. And so in this case, since it's a string, we're going to evaluate the literal 1, the literal 2, the literal string 3. And if none of those cases are correct, then we'll evaluate the default switch case. Also notice that I use the break statement, which says after this line of code, then jump out of this code block. And we'll see this syntax, this break keyword, again when we look at looping iterative statements and things of that nature. Okay. So again, exclusivity is the name of the game. Also, just a few tips here. Generally, it's a good practice to prefer the if statement until the list grows long of possible options, and or when there's an exclusive condition that must be met. This would be a good situation for that. For example, the user can only type 1, 2, or 3, and there's only one outcome for each of those values. Again, with an if statement, although we didn't demonstrate it, there is a way to write it so that multiple statements, multiple evaluations are true. Okay, so very short video, but now we have 3 ways to write a decision statement. If we need an inline option, we can choose the inline conditional operator. If we need exclusivity, then we can use the switch statement. Or for all other cases, that if statement syntax that we learned yesterday should fit the bill just fine. Okay, so that's all you need to know, at least for a while, about decision statements. So hope that serves you well, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.